What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 138. We're back to recap week 12 in the SEC and around college football. We talked a lot last week about how pivotal this Georgia Tennessee game was for the SEC championship race. If Georgia could get the job done, that would throw that tiebreaker scenario, make that a reality with multiple teams, and that's exactly what we have now. Georgia getting it done in Athens Saturday night, 31-17. After Tennessee jumped up 10-0 in this game, I'm sure Georgia fans were probably a little nervous early on. The way last week went in Oxford against Ole Miss, Tennessee got off to a really good start, but give Georgia a ton of credit. I mean, you knew obviously they weren't going to lay down, but with some of the flaws you've seen from Georgia this year, I think there was a little bit of a reason to doubt and say, oh, this isn't, this could be a rough night for Georgia, but give them a lot of credit for fighting back. I thought this was the best we've seen Carson Beck this year, considering the stage and the opponent, season on the line, playoffs on the line, against a big rival in Tennessee. I thought he was outstanding. Thought he made some great throws down the field. Thought he did a good job with his legs, moving the chains, scored a touchdown on a scramble. I thought there were some opportunities there where he was able to make a few plays. One of the biggest stats of this game for me, and that you necessarily wouldn't expect when you're thinking about these two teams in Georgia and Tennessee, but Georgia had 11 plays of 15 yards or more. Tennessee only had one. That was really the difference in the game. Georgia was able to create more explosive plays. They don't have Brock Bowers out there, but man, they utilize their tight ends
Yeah.
extremely well in this game between the group. I'm sure a lot of people were wondering, like, man, I wish we could have gone to that a little bit earlier and kind of made them a focal point a little bit more because there's a lot of talent in that room. But after going down 10-0 to close the game on a 31-7 run was really impressive against this Tennessee defense, the way they've been playing. So I was really impressed with Georgia. I mean, you knew they weren't going to go down easy. I mean, they had two losses, seasons on the line. Um, they've won a ton of big games, and they're one of those teams like you got to get them while they're down. Like you don't want to let them get off the mat and have a chance to keep fighting here late in the season. But I was really impressed with their performance and specifically Carson Beck, his first no turnover game in 5 games, and that's a big reason they won the game. I thought he was terrific and just a huge win for Georgia Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Carson Beck, like you said, played to what we expected to see him all year. I mean, there were some throws, he was threading the needle. I mean, there was some guy, he was splitting defenders. There was one, I can't remember, I believe it was the third quarter, but don't quote me on that. But they were driving down the field and he hit number 11 on the sideline right there, like right on the sideline, and the Tennessee DB dove and I mean barely missed it. He could not have placed it any better than he did, or it would have been an interception. I mean, he was seeing things perfect the other night. But the biggest shock to me was Tennessee's lack of pressure on Carson Beck. Like that's what they're known for, really. This year, their defense. I mean, they're going to get in the backfield and disrupt the backfield, and they really weren't getting back there to Carson Beck all that much. And really, he had a lot of time in the pocket, had a lot of clean pockets all night. And when it broke down, he was able to obviously use his legs and extend plays more than we've seen him in quite some time. But he channeled his inner Stetson Bennett there a couple times, making a few good runs. But I mean, I couldn't believe the lack of pressure that Tennessee couldn't get there or that couldn't get on them. But Tennessee jumped out early. That's been the problem for Tennessee all year is a slow start, not being able to, score in the first quarter. I think this was the third time they've done it all year, something like that, maybe fourth. Uh, but when they jumped out early, I was like, okay, they got something going. Dylan Sampson was running the ball extremely well. Number 27, I can't think of his name right now. Peyton Lewis, he ran the ball extremely well at times too. So I thought, okay, they're just going to gash them to death. I can't believe that we're about to see Georgia get ran all over at their home field. That's what I was expecting after the first two or three drives. I was like, just hand it off to number 6, number 27 all night, and you're going to be fine. But then obviously Georgia made some adjustments. They were able to drive down the field and put up some points to Oscar Delp. That was a fantastic play call. I mean, absolutely, completely wide open. Great drive there by the Bulldogs, and then but so Tennessee goes 10 unanswered, and then right back Georgia punches them right back in the face 2 times, back to back, scores 14 unanswered. And then Dylan Sampson, here he goes. I mean, I felt like they just gave it to him every time that drive, and then he ends up breaking a long run, scoring. Uh, I thought that maybe Tennessee abandoned the run game a little too much in the third quarter. I don't think they ran the ball enough in the third quarter. That's just from an outsider's perspective watching it. Maybe you disagree with me, but I felt like they abandoned the run game a little too much and relied a little too much on Nico on the road, especially when your run game was working as well as it was. I mean, it's not like they were stuffing them at times, but there was more consistent 5 yard gains than there were anything else. And so I just couldn't believe that they went away from it as much as they did to put all that pressure and all the rely on Nico solely there in the second half when I didn't think it was much really necessary to do that. But other than that, Georgia's defense, this game reminded me a lot of the Alabama and Georgia game. Obviously, not near as out of hand in the first half, but Georgia, the way they responded in the second half and were able to hold them, scoreless, and they just dominated on the other side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball. It reminded me a lot of that. Georgia has not lost back-to-back games under Kirby Smart since his first year in 2016. So it really doesn't come as a shock. This is, I mean, rinse and repeat. We've seen it year after year after year. They're not going to lose back-to-back games. Very rare if it does happen. So they're sitting pretty and probably going to be in the college football playoffs. The Georgia Bulldogs can have a sigh of relief. Now, I do want to talk about something before we talk about some other games and before we finish talking about this game. So we know we've talked about all the tiebreakers and yada, yada, yada. It was really a lot about is Alabama going to be in or is LSU going to be in because the opponent's win percentage and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Well, LSU they pooped the bed. They ain't even in the conversation no more. So Alabama, if they win out, they're in it for sure, no matter what. Alabama, they control their destiny. If they win it, they're in the SEC championship. Okay. So if they win it and Texas A&M beats Auburn and Texas beats Texas A&M, then it'll be Alabama and Texas. If everybody wins out and Texas A&M beats Texas, it'll be Alabama and Texas A&M. But if Auburn beats Texas A&M and Texas A&M beats Texas, then it will be Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people from the South are tired of seeing that matchup. I'm gonna be honest. I hate both of those teams. Those are my two most hated teams. I love seeing that matchup. I don't want either of them to win, but I love college football. I love high caliber college football, and that's what I want. Obviously, I want Texas A&M, or I want Auburn to beat Texas A&M because I'm an Auburn fan. But I really want it to happen so that they can turn around and beat Texas and have all chaos, assuming that Alabama wins out and doesn't lose in the Iron Bowl, which I don't see happening, especially at Bryant-Denny. So that's what I'm hoping for now. I would love to see another matchup with Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship game. After what we saw, that masterclass this year of the tale of two halves, that's what I'm rooting for. I think it's probably more than likely going to be Alabama and Texas or Alabama and Texas A&M, realistically. But we had some chaos that we wanted to happen this week, and it happened. So I'm hoping that we get some more chaos this week. I'm hoping Auburn can take down A&M, then A&M can take down Texas, and then we get Georgia and Alabama in that SEC championship game. Now, if Auburn beats Texas A&M and Texas A&M beats Texas and Auburn beats Alabama, I don't know what happens. I had not heard that scenario because that's very unlikely. But you want to talk about chaos? There's chaos. But we can get back to the game. I just wanted to say Georgia really now has a realistic chance to be playing in Atlanta in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think there's only one other thing Alabama needs, barring winning out, is they do need Missouri to win one of their last two games, either against Mississippi State this weekend or against Arkansas, because obviously Alabama played Missouri. So if Missouri were to lose both those games, it would drop their win percentage. So it would drop Alabama's opponent's win percentage down. And I think it would drop it down enough where Georgia would go over Alabama.
Really?
To play. Yeah. So there is
even if Alabama wins out.
Yes, even if Alabama wins out. So they do need Missouri, which they should win. I mean, they're playing Mississippi
One of the
State.
next
They
two, yeah.
should win one of those two. I would think they would win this weekend, but you never know. I mean, Missouri, we'll talk about them in a little bit, but I mean, you never know this year. But that is, I think there is a scenario, albeit not likely, where Alabama could win out and maybe not get there if Missouri were to tank, or maybe a couple other results. I looked. Um, I don't know who to credit on this. I saw it on Twitter. Someone created a website where you can go in and choose the results of the remaining games and calculate the standings to see who would be in. It's really interesting. But I don't know who created the website, so I'm not sure who to credit there. But some of our listeners may have already seen that floating around on Twitter or just on the internet in general. So we should have a lot more clarity after this weekend based on the results. You know, Alabama going to Oklahoma if they win that, barring if Missouri wins. You know, obviously if Missouri wins and Alabama wins, all Alabama need to do is win the Iron Bowl to go to Atlanta. So Texas A&M's at Auburn. That's going to be a big, deciding game.
Night game
Uh,
too. Finally got a
for
night game.
yeah, so for Texas A&M's hopes of getting to Atlanta. But yeah, it seems the most likely scenario at the moment, barring anything just crazy, would be Alabama playing the winner of Texas and Texas A&M. That's the most likely scenario at the moment. But we'll have a lot more clarity, after this weekend, and we'll be able to talk a lot more about potential scenarios next weekend once we have a lot better idea. But yeah, huge win for Georgia. They're very much still alive based on obviously for the playoff, but even for Atlanta because their strength of schedule, their opponent record is so good. That's putting them
Mhm.
at the top of those or near the top of those two loss teams in the SEC. Texas, they really can't afford a second loss because their opponent's win percentage is not nearly as high based on who they played. So they really need to win out to make it to Atlanta and beat Texas A&M and then Kentucky this weekend. So going to be really interesting down the stretch. Obviously, a lot of debates been going on Twitter between not just Alabama's fan base, but a lot of the fan bases that are a two-loss team in the SEC. Would you rather go to Atlanta, like a team like Georgia? They're likely this week going to be and over the next week are going to be in that 11th, 12th spot in the playoff race. Like they're going to be right, barely inside, probably. So, the debate is: would you rather just not play the SEC championship and not have to risk getting left out completely if you lost, especially when you're so close to the bubble? Would you rather just go into the playoffs and not have to risk it versus playing in the SEC championship, potentially getting a bye? There's a lot of debate about that. I put on my personal account, just from my perspective, I always want to like in my opinion, if you got a chance to win a championship, like you need to take it. Like that's what you play the games for is to win championships, to win the SEC. I know with expanded playoff, the mindset is now well the conference championships don't mean quite as much with the playoff being a little expanded, but I mean, if you got a chance to get a championship trophy, to hang a banner or whatnot, I think you got to take that opportunity. I know that's the team's mindset.
Well,
Every team they want that opportunity. So
I mean, that's what you train for in the off season. Nick Saban was not preaching national championship before he was preaching SEC championship. You can't get to one. Well, you can, but you're not trying to get to one without getting to the other. Your goal is to get to every championship you can. You win. When he was there, win the West, then win the conference, then win it all. Like that's the steps you go to. You don't try to leap over the other. Blah blah blah. Whatever. My argument, the flip side of that is, okay, you're left out. You say you don't want to go to the SEC championship because if you lose, you potentially could be left out. Okay, I hear you. But if you don't go at all, You're probably going to be a lower seed, which means you're probably traveling across
Yeah.
the country in some cold ass weather more than likely. And you're from the South, it's probably not going to benefit you anyway. Instead, you could go to the conference championship game, potentially win it, and then sit at home in the comfort of your warm house while everybody else has to travel to the cold places and play in the cold places. And then you get to go play at neutral sites the rest of the time. Everybody's like, well, you might get left out. Well, yeah, you might get left out, or you might not get left out if you don't go, but you're going to be playing in Indiana. Like I promise you, it's going to benefit Indiana more than Alabama. I don't think that Alabama would lose to them in Indiana, but it's going to benefit them, and it will change the game. Whether being at home for Indiana and things along those lines, it just makes no sense to me. Like their argument here is completely different, just 180 on the other side. Like it makes no sense to me. But you're talking about there's a lot of arguments and debates going on online. The one that I saw this weekend that really, really, really got me going. I don't know the guy's handle, but he's a Big Ten fan for sure. He's a fan. The team he's a fan of is in the Big Ten because Kirby Smart after the game he's talking to whoever was interviewing him
Hmm.
on the field, and he's like, "I invite anybody to come down here and play in the SEC and play our schedule week in week out." Somebody quote tweeted it and said, "I invite the SEC to play one more conference game like everybody else does." I'm like, "All right, SEC plays 8, everybody else plays 9. We're going to act like them playing one more game makes them a better conference or whatever when their conference is softer than wet bread. They have 3 teams max to each conference." That is literally the equivalent of saying that Jake Paul is a better fighter than Conor McGregor because Jake Paul's never lost. Well, who the hell has Jake Paul played? Or excuse me, fought compared to who has Conor McGregor ever fought? And Conor McGregor's only lost a very little amount of times. Like it's very, I mean, asinine argument that you can honestly sit there and look at your standings of your conference. Pick whatever conference it is. It doesn't matter. You can tell me your standings and look at it, and you can maybe pick 3 teams out of there that could potentially go to the college football playoff. And then you look at the SEC standing, and there is legit 5 teams that have a real possibility of getting in the CFP, and really should be 6 teams because I'm taking all those 6 teams over any of the teams minus the Oregons, the Ohio States, and people like that. I just the ACC, they're probably maybe only get 1 team in this year. The champion is probably going to be the only one to get in.
Yeah.
Maybe between SMU and Miami, if it's a really close game, they both get in. But SMU has gotten 0 love for anything this year. Their only loss being to BYU by 3 points. They've gotten 0 love at all. But they could potentially be a top 4 team with a bye if they win the ACC championship.
Hmm.
The rankings and the committee is baffling to me because SMU's resume is 10 times better than BYU's, but BYU's got all the love because they have no losses. Well, they do now, and everybody sees, they lost to a 3-4 team or whatever they were, 3-5, whatever the hell it was. But it's asinine for people to honestly argue against the SEC. You might hate the SEC, you might hate how good they are or how good the SEC is and how dominant they are, and you can despise that, but you cannot honestly sit there and say that your conference, again, whatever other conference it is better than the SEC because you are talking out of the side of your neck. It is a flat out lie, and no one honestly holds that argument with any weight because of the 9 teams you're playing, you got Illinois, you got Iowa. Like, what did it, other than this year, you had Indiana, Nebraska, who ain't been nothing since the 70s or 80s, whatever. I mean, my God.
Northwestern's atrocious.
Northwestern. I mean, it is laughable. So shut the hell up with that argument. That got me fired up. I had to get out of here. But moving on from that, if you don't want to touch on anything about that, we can move on to some other games.
Well, I agree with you. I think you look at the top 6 in the SEC: Texas, Texas A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama, Ole Miss. That's your top 6. Your 7th place team in the SEC right now is South Carolina,
I'm
who
taking them
is
over a lot of
about
teams.
as hot as anyone. They're playing as well
I
as
think they could beat
anybody.
Oregon right now. You saw how Oregon played against Wisconsin Saturday. I think or South Carolina could beat Oregon right now. Realistically, I think they could very well beat them.
Yeah, I mean they're a good team. I mean they're that close to being, only 1 or 2 losses and being in the playoff conversation themselves. So yeah, I think you look at the top, half of this league, it's really impressive. Um, but yeah, kind of wanted to touch on some other games. Obviously, Texas at Arkansas at the 11 a.m. game Saturday. I mean, not super surprised by this game. I thought Arkansas had a chance to keep it close. They did that. Um, Texas defense was pretty dominant in this game. I believe Arkansas's first 8 or 9 drives, they only had 75 total yards. I mean, so it was they put it together in the third quarter, went on a long drive to cut it to 13-7. Um, Forced a 3 and out, drove the ball down the field, had a chance to take the lead 14-13. They ended up having to settle for a field goal. I thought the biggest drive of the game, Texas went right back down and responded to make it 20-10. Arkansas was coming back down the field, threw a screen, receiver fumbled, and that was pretty much all she wrote. Texas was able to put a drive together just to ice the game and put it away. Yeah, just thought Texas defense was dominant, forced 2 turnovers. Arkansas put a couple drives there late, but the game as a whole, it was dominant for Texas. Didn't turn the ball over offensively, forced 2 turnovers on defense, and um, you know, thought they ran the ball pretty good. Had some good, Sark's so good with his motion. They had some good misdirection type of runs that I thought were pretty effective. Kind of waiting on Texas to. I know they had a breakout game, or offensively they were really good against Florida, but I'm just kind of waiting on Quinn Ewers to put together that like elite type of game. Like he's been really good for most of the season, but I think there's another level that he can get to that's in there somewhere. And I think he's going to need to hit that for them to win it all. But I think they're more than capable of doing that. I think they're a really well-rounded team. They're definitely in the top, 4 or 5 of well-rounded teams in the country. But I do think when it comes to playoff time, there's going to be another level he's going to need to crank it up to. And if he's able to do that, they're more than capable of winning it all. They're one of I would say good handful or so that's going to have the opportunity to do that. Um, and not overlooking them playing Kentucky, but I think just like everyone, just really excited to see them go into College Station. Um, we've been waiting a long time for this rivalry to get renewed, and I think it's going to be even bigger than people expected it to be at the beginning of the season. So not to overlook their game this weekend, but I think like everyone else, can't wait for that game in College Station. Man, that environment's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're, hitting it right on the head. Saying Quinn Ewers needs to take that next step for them to really become elite and have a real chance. However, I do think with the teams and the schedule that they drew this year, that they haven't really had to completely open up their playbook all the way yet. This Saturday, watching them, it really felt like they were just being not vanilla, but they weren't. I mean, just going wide open on their offense, like everything they could do. I think we're going to see that as they get into the postseason, the potential of the conference championship game, and then the playoffs. I think their offensive playbook is going to open up a lot more. We're going to see a lot of things that we haven't seen. I think Quinn Ewers is obviously plenty capable of taking on new things week after week. But I think that that's a lot of what it is. They don't really have to do a whole lot of nothing because their defense is so dominant, especially against a team like Arkansas. Really was a fairly mundane game, nothing really super exciting. But yeah, I mean, Texas took care of business, and really the score doesn't show how. I mean, 10 points. It really doesn't show how in control Texas was the whole game.
Yeah, and really now, this is the part of the podcast I've really been looking forward to getting to. We've talked as much as we can about them. We talked a lot about them in the preseason, and that's the Florida Gators. Big win over LSU in the swamp. Um, I wasn't sure when we recorded last weekend what DJ Lagway's status was. When he got injured against Georgia, initially they were thinking like, hey, it could be a season-ending injury. They really weren't sure initially. But for him to make it back within a few weeks, and obviously didn't use his legs really in this game, didn't want to put him, in harm's way any more than they had to. But man, I mean, this Florida team is a really solid football team with DJ Lagway on the field. Um, yeah, I think they're a top 25 team when he's out there. Thought their defense has steadily improved throughout the season. I mean, we were talking about before we started recording, LSU had given up 6 sacks in 9 games this year. Florida sacked Garrett Nussmeier 7 times. I mean, harassed him the entire game. This stat line is got to be one of the biggest anomalies for a team that didn't end up winning the game. I mean, you look at this box score, you look at the stat sheet, you're wondering how in the heck LSU lost this game. I mean, this is unbelievable. Almost 42 minutes time of possession. Florida had 18 minutes. 25 first downs for LSU to 13 for Florida. Uh, Total yardage 382 to 339, so fairly close there. The biggest thing for me, LSU ran 92 plays. Florida only ran 43. I mean, that is 92 plays. I mean,
That is
that is unbelievable. And to lose the game by 11 points at that, like if you ran 92 plays and lost on the last play or something, in a 48-45 shootout, that would be one thing. But to run 92 plays and only score 16 points is I think it's been a long time probably since that's happened. Um, but yeah, I mean, just when you look at some of those numbers, you're wondering to yourself like, how in the world did um, LSU not win this game? They had a 13 play drive, 6 minutes 45 seconds, missed a field goal. Uh, they had a 12 play drive, ended in a field goal. 15 play drive ended in a field goal. Um, Another 15 play drive ended in a field goal. I mean, they were moving the ball down the field. They just could not finish drives at all. Another 12 play drive, turnover on downs. So I mean, it was like they were converting first downs. I think they were over 50% on third down. They just couldn't convert it into points or convert in the red zone and turn it into touchdowns. That was really the difference in the game. Florida was able to create a lot more explosive plays, and that was obviously a big difference in why they got doubled up in total plays. But yeah, just a total anomaly from the box score to the final score. But just really happy for Billy Napier for Florida. I think you could just tell his relief or just kind of the gratification. I think in his post game interview. Um, his guys have been fighting really hard. I mean, this team's playing as hard as anybody in the country. Um, but you could tell it was gratifying for them to finally, they've been grinding and grinding and grinding, but for it to finally pay off with some good success on the field, you could tell, and in a win, you could tell that was a really, I don't want to say, I don't know if relief's the right word, but just you could tell how gratified he was about that. Um, and from outside perspective and people that's been around the program, like the pieces are in place there, the mindset's in the right place. Like a lot of pieces that are in place, the wins just haven't paid off yet. And I think you're kind of starting to see that turn a little bit. Some really good young talent on this team, not just DJ Lagway. Jaden Ball had a big touchdown run at the end. Um, LJ McCray was one of their top recruits in this past class. So there's some really good young talent there to build around. And they've gained some momentum since they announced Billy Napier's coming back next year. So good to see Florida kind of trending in the right direction. I mean, it doesn't guarantee you anything down the road or what's going to happen next year, but I think people are feeling much more optimistic now than maybe even they were, 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's good to see Florida and Billy Napier get some success going their way.
Excuse me. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you pointed out a few minutes ago, the biggest thing that stood out to me in this game for Florida was just their identity, their attitude. They wanted to be there. You could tell they wanted it more than LSU did. They were willing to fight. They did not give up. And you could not have looked at this team and said, yeah, that's a 4-5 football team. Like you'd have never known what their record was because they were playing with their hair on fire all night long. LSU's players did not seem as motivated in the slightest like Florida's were. You saw there was a time when Brian Kelly's telling Kyron Lacey, I believe it was Kyron Lacey, but I could be wrong, that he needs to be coachable and that, who do you think you are? Basically, you're not bigger than anybody or better than anybody in this program. Not a good sign to see. Obviously, you like seeing Brian Kelly coaching hard like that, but you don't like seeing that has to be something that he's having to coach, especially this late in the year. But yes, I mean Florida, like you said, a lot of young talent. They play with their hair on fire, but LSU had their opportunities and just could not capitalize on it. Dropped an interception, hit the linebacker right in the hands, first drive of the game. 4 plays later, they end up scoring a touchdown. I mean, obviously, you still probably lose 20-16, but I mean that's a momentum taker right there in the first drive. I mean, you can take all the momentum out of that stadium and not the fans completely out of it, and you have a short field right after you stalled out, you get a quick turnover like that, could have changed the game completely, but didn't take advantage of that. Obviously, like you said, got down to the red zone 5-6 times it seems like, and could never come away with six. I just it got sloppy there late, and you could just tell that in the second half, Florida was going to win that game because they had more fight in them for sure. They wanted it way more than LSU did, and that was obviously great and good to see for Florida. But man, Brian Kelly it looks like he's losing that team a little bit right now, and at the end of the year, and of people being on the hot seat next year, I think Brian Kelly, I don't think he's going to lose his job or anything after next year, but I think that seat's getting a little warm down there in Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting off season. I mean, I think it's become apparent, especially the last few weeks, and everyone knew this to an extent, but the defense was atrocious last year. It's been much better, but I just don't think the personnel is there that they really need yet, like that you would expect an LSU caliber defense to have. I mean, so they've got some overhauling still to do on that defense. I mean, definitely a lot better than what they were because they had nowhere to go but up. And I think they've got the right guys there. The coaching perspective, I think they've got the right guys in place. I think it's just going to take another recruiting cycle, getting in the transfer portal, just upgrading the talent on that side of the ball. Is going to be big. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's going to lose his job. Like I don't think he's going to lose his job there anytime soon. To be honest with you, but it's definitely a lot more uneasiness, a lot more people questioning. People getting a little unhappy. Like this
Yeah.
is year three, and now you're 6-4, and
And you've
you know,
regressed each year. He's gotten worse each year by a
so
game or two.
so you're like, defensively still got a little ways to go. You know, um, just especially if the team continues to slide a little bit. You if you get beat, it's one thing, but you never want to get out hustled. You never want to get out efforted. You don't want the other team to beat. A large reason for the other team to beat you is just because they played harder than you did. Like those type of things are, you know, especially more glaring when your team. I think that's what's such a good indictment on Billy Napier, or a good perspective for Billy Napier is like, look at the way his team is still fighting. Like they've lost 5 games and they're still out there busting their butt, trying to get to bowl eligibility, trying to build for future seasons. I think that's it's a huge feather in his cap. So, for LSU, it's going to be big for them to hopefully end this slide, and kind of finish the season on the right note. And like, hey, we're still out there. Didn't go our way. Like we have our flaws, but we're still out there giving 100%. Um, so yeah, big last couple weeks. I mean, it's definitely going to be an interesting off season around there for sure. Um, people are going to get a little uneasy, but yeah, I don't think he's losing his job there anytime soon or anything. I'm not, you know, I honestly think I think he's got a good chance to get it figured out. I just think from the personnel on defensively, they've got a really good recruiting class coming in. Bryce Underwood's the number one overall player on a lot of sites. Um, it seems like he's locked in there, and he's kind of the future of that program. So Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, but there's definitely, a lot more questions, a lot more uneasiness going into this offseason than there has been before for him down there.
Absolutely. Now, the game that I really want to talk about, South Carolina, Missouri. Man, this was a damn good football game. Had a chance to get out of hand really early. I
Yeah,
thought it was going to, especially after that long touchdown run that South Carolina had and made it 21-7. I thought, or 21-6, whatever it was. I thought, man, this game might get ugly quick. But hats off to Drink. He's not my favorite coach in the world, but hats off to him. He got his team back in it, and he was able to hold South Carolina down and really fight all the way back and had a chance to win. And I think it was 54 seconds left that South Carolina drove down and ended up having a game scoring drive. I believe it was 54 seconds, something like that. Like an amazing finish. I mean, Missouri had like a minute and a half or something like that, and they went down and scored pretty quick. And then South Carolina had 50 something seconds, and they went down and scored and won the game. I thought it was fantastic. I thought Lenore Sellers had another fantastic night. I mean, he threw for 5 touchdowns, ran the ball. South Carolina as a whole ran the ball really well against Missouri in the early in the game for sure. And then later in the game, they kind of figured it out again. But there in the late second, third quarter, Missouri kind of had it figured out a little bit, was stopping them on offense, and they were running some stretch plays that South Carolina just couldn't quite figure out and couldn't stop. And they were getting good chunk yardage out of that. Brady Cook, started leading some drives a little bit. But I mean, as a whole, South Carolina toted the rock on Saturday. They came out. They might not have scored many touchdowns on the ground. I mean, they got what, three on the ground? What was that? No, none on the ground, but they ran the ball for 109 yards 36 times. I mean, they said we're going to hand it, we're going to call it and run it, call it and run it. So 109 times ran the ball, obviously threw the ball for 360 something yards and 5 touchdowns. So through the air they were really good, but they relied on their run game. Rocket Sanders got 19 carries. Lenore Sellers had uh 14 carries. So I mean, they relied on their run game. Obviously, their RPO type offense. But I thought Lenore Sellers is really, really, really the last few weeks coming into his own,
yeah,
especially with that game winning drive. I mean, that's a big boost to his confidence going into the end of the year and then obviously into the future of the program. But I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Shane Beamer, SEC Coach of the Year. I mean, nobody's really been giving him that talk until this week. I mean, they're sitting at 7-3, and very realistically could be 8-2. I mean, this is a very, very good ball club. I know that I've been glazing the hell out of Shane Beamer the last few weeks on this podcast, but I really, really am a big fan of Shane Beamer. I really, truly am. I think he's done a fantastic job. But since so I, he's the best coach that South Carolina's had since Steve Spurrier. I think he's better than Lou Holtz. But since Lou Holtz's third or fourth season there, this is the most successful they've been since then. I mean, there's been several coaches come through here that just could not get it done. Shane Beamer has figured it out, and I said last week, he's built a fantastic program. But they fight till the end. They're a lot like Florida. Like they might not match up with you roster wise perfectly, but those guys are going to try and outfight you. There's till the last whistle is blown. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you can go back to the Ole Miss South Carolina game when Ole Miss thumped them, 31-6 or whatever it was. You don't look at the scoreboard and you just see it's in the middle of the third quarter and watch them play. You think it's a tie ball game. This South Carolina team does not quit. You obviously see that in their play and how dominant they've been the last few weeks, especially
yeah,
on the defensive side of the ball. And then obviously since Texas A&M really offensively they've been dominant, but they just don't quit. They've gotten better and better and better each and every week. Shane Beamer is to me is the coach of the year for SEC. I don't think that there's any arguments about it. Now if Vandy can win out and beat Tennessee, I guess they could get it. But Shane Beamer is the one. I know we've been talking about him a lot the last few weeks, but hats off to him, man. That is not an easy job in the SEC. No job in the SEC is easy, but a job like South Carolina and to go in there and be able to potentially have 8-9 wins at the end of the year, it's something special that he's doing down there.
yeah. I agree totally. I mean, he has been fantastic. I mean, this is a team. They're just outside the top 20 in the CFP rankings. Obviously, they're not going to make it in, but this is not a team that anybody wants to play right now. That goes
No,
Oregon, Ohio
no.
State, Bama, Georgia. Texas, you
Ole
name
Miss
it.
don't want to play him again. I'll tell you that because it would not be 31-6. I promise
Yeah.
you that.
No, I mean, South Carolina has been really good, man. Lenore Sellers, I mean, you're seeing a star, emerging right now before your eyes.
Mr.
Um,
Goggles.
the way, yeah. I mean, the goggles, man. He's playing at a really high level, gaining more and more confidence, each week. So Shane Beamer, he's got his quarterback of the future. He's got a pair of elite edge rushers as they've displayed all year long. Um, so yeah, he's really got things trending in the right direction there. They got a great chance to finish the season on a strong note. They got Wofford this weekend, so yeah, give them 8. And then a huge game at Clemson on rivalry weekend, which is going to be a really really fun matchup. I'm excited for that one on rivalry week. They're at Clemson, so yeah, a really good chance to you're looking at least 8, maybe 9.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that would be fantastic. A couple a couple really close losses mixed in there. I mean, the you know the Alabama game, they had a chance at the end to win.
I
Because
mean,
of
you think they had a pick six to beat LSU. They got called back on a flag, on a bogus flag, by the way.
Yeah,
And I know that I had taken LSU to win that game and cover, but I talked about it, and I remember vividly talking about it after it happened. We raised hell on this podcast that was the biggest bogus call of the, like, what the hell are you calling that for? An 80-something yard pick six, 90-something yard pick six to win them. I mean, there was a few minutes left, but that won them the game. And now you're sitting here, they could be 8-2 in the conversation with all these other teams, the Tennessee, the Georgia, the Alabama. They got robbed of that straight up. And I don't like blaming a lot of things on refs, like blaming the outcomes of games on ref. But that one, 1,000% was on the referees. South Carolina should have another win there and should be in that conversation of the 10-2 teams at the end of the year, or the
well,
six and
and
two in conference.
yeah, and not only that too, they've proven to be the better team since then.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, I mean, it's obvious that obviously it was what week that was week 3,
3 or 4.
but they've proven to be the better team this year.
Oh
So
yeah.
that pick six, they would have went up 11 with just I
I
think
think 2 minutes to
7
go or
minutes left.
something.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, I mean that was a huge play. I mean, yeah, they're right there. Um, in the I forgot what they are on the CFP rankings exactly right now, 21 as of now. So yeah, they would be up there around where Texas A&M's at probably, or around Georgia, in that 13, 14. They'd be right there on the bubble right now more than likely. So yeah, I mean that's a season changing type of play.
Week
Um,
3. You don't
so
think about it. It doesn't feel like that then. But I mean, you look back now. I mean, we're in week 12, week 13 now, and you look back 10 weeks ago. That one call very well could keep South Carolina, or has kept South Carolina out of the college football playoff potentially.
yeah,
'Cause I
so I
think
mean
they're going to mop the floor with Clemson. I think they're going to mop the floor with Clemson.
yeah, I like South Carolina in that game right now. I like I said, they're not going to make the playoff, but that's definitely not a team that anybody would want to see.
They better
Um,
make a good bowl. They better make a damn good bowl.
yeah. I mean, they're definitely going to because I mean they're going to be one of the first SEC teams not in. Um, so yeah, I know they only take the 12 in the playoff, but the way South Carolina's playing right now, they're one of the 12 hottest. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
Um,
Before we
but
go into anything else, I do got something that I saw twice this weekend that really just makes me be 26 years old and be an old man yelling at clouds. I know it's a new era of college football. I know the NIL has brought in a little more me ball, a little more than the team has been. I get it. But this weekend I saw it in 2 separate games. Pisses me off to no end. And I've been a part of teams my whole life, so this is why it pisses me off that bad. Cade Klubnik makes a long, fantastic run to win the game this past Saturday. He really did. I mean, scrambled. It was not a design like, going for a touchdown run. He turned it into a really, really good play, ends up winning the game with a touchdown run, seals the deal, basically. He runs over to the sideline, hops up on the bench, starts celebrating with the fans. I'm cool with it. Whatever. Then he turns around and gives this number right here. Gives the old pointing to his last name. That shit pisses me off. Then you watch the LSU game. Nussmeier makes a good play. I believe it was their first touchdown. He gets hit and throws a touchdown pass. And when he's running down the field, he's pointing at his last name. I'm like, what? That makes me so mad, bro. Like, you are a team. Do this number right here. Talk about the team logo. Point at your helmet logo. Don't single out yourself and your last name like you were the one. Oh, that drives me nuts. I promise you, if you're as good as you think you are, everybody's going to know your name. Everybody's going to know who did that. If you're as good as you think you are, everybody's going to know. You don't have to point to your last name and your nameplate. That made me so mad. I know it's happened more, and I know this ain't the first year it's ever happened or the first time it's ever happened, but me seeing it twice on Saturday, it drove me nuts, dude. Number one, because you almost lost to a team that you shouldn't even be on the field with you. Then you're gonna point at your nameplate. No, point at the Clemson logo. And then Nussmeier, you throw an early touchdown and you're gonna point at your nameplate like you just won the national championship. Get the hell out of here. And you end up losing. The me ball is getting ridiculous, dude. But like Joe Burrow did it, but I'm pretty positive when Joe Burrow did it, it was either the SEC championship game, the semifinal, or the national championship game. He didn't do it every time. He did do it one time, but it was on like the championship, whatever. It wasn't just some mop-up game. I didn't love it when he did it either, but it's a little understandable then, blah, blah, blah. But in the middle of week 12, and you're going to point to your nameplate because you make a good play that you're supposed to do, get the hell out of here. Again, if you're as good as you think you are, you ain't got to point to the last name on the back. We know who the hell you are. Oh,
Well, that says something too that you're willing to call out the Nuss Bus, because I mean you're like
yes,
you're like front seat of the Nuss Bus.
I'm driving that mofo.
So,
Next time he tries to board, I might have to give him a talking to before he can sit on the bus.
yeah,
We ain't filling the bus up again until you get an ass chewing, son. That's ridiculous.
Nuss Bus hit some road bumps the other day.
Yeah, I had to change a tire or two. Had to change a tire or two.
Yeah, no doubt. The suspension's a little wobbly at this point of the season,
We ain't selling this, getting our money back. We go on marketplace and getting half our money back.
Yeah. So yeah, still like them a lot, but
Had to get that off my chest, a little yelling at clouds moment.
No, I agree with you there. Did just want to touch on a couple of the other games just to kind of to just talk about some results. I mean, if there's anything you want to add to any of these, feel free. Bama rolls over Mercer 52-7. This was kind of a little bit of lighter week in the SEC for a lot of teams. The last 2 weeks are pretty big for most teams with conference games. Auburn kicks UL Monroe's tail 48-14. Cam Coleman highlight reel catch in the end zone.
Hell of a day for him. 100 yards, 3 tutties, 8 catches. Hell of a day.
Yep. Kentucky rolls Murray State, 48-6. The 1-10 Racers.
How bad is Murray State? My God.
Yeah, got absolute lids. And then A&M beats New Mexico State, and this is not your Diego Pavia, New Mexico State, or your Jerry Kill, New Mexico State, or your Eli Stowers, New Mexico State. Yeah, this ain't your brother's New Mexico State anymore. This is a 2-8 in Conference USA. Yeah. A&M rolls to a victory before heading to the Plains this weekend. So, got some good ones on the board this week, not only in the SEC but around the country. I think there's some upset potential on the board this week. No doubt about it. It's going to be really, really fun to watch it, see what happens. Um, I gotta ask you, I've been dying to ask you, prime time in Jordan Hare Stadium, Auburn hosting Texas A&M. On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think the odds are? And this is a 2.5 point line, so this actually would not be nearly as big of an upset as people think. I've got a gut feeling on this game. Scale of 1 to 10, what are the odds you think Auburn can pull upset, and what are you expecting in this game per se?
If the 1 to 10 is percentages, I say there's a 25% chance that Auburn pulls the upset. I don't think it will be because of Texas A&M's offense and Marcel Reed. I think he is super talented, but Auburn has faced some mobile quarterbacks this year and done a fairly good job. I mean, minus one play against Oklahoma, they did a really good job containing the Oklahoma quarterback. Um, Marcel Reed can throw it a little bit better than him. They rely on him to throw it a little bit more. The last few weeks they have. I think they're going to have to. I think Auburn's going to be fine containing their offense, but their defense is what really, really, really worries me. They are very versatile on defense. They're very deep on defense. They can throw a lot of things at you. Um, I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle, man. Peyton Thorne's been playing extremely well the last few weeks. I mean, outside or after the what was that the Cal game or the no the outside after the Oklahoma game, he's played actually really good. I mean, and minus one play in the Oklahoma game, he did a pretty good job. So I think he's going to give Auburn the best chance to win the next two games. Now that's saying something. I don't know why the line is so small. It reminds me a lot of the Vandy line. I ended up staying away from it because I thought, well, maybe they know something I don't. Um, I don't think they know something that I don't this week. I think Texas A&M is going to win. Obviously, I want Auburn to win, and I hope it happens. But their defense, man, I just don't see Auburn successfully moving the ball against this defense, especially if they're not going to ride Jarquez the way they should. Got 1,000 yards this past week. Jarquez Hunter did. Congrats to him. Got 100 yards in the game. Got 1,000 yards on the season. Should have came about 3 weeks ago if they'd actually give him the damn ball. So that's the biggest thing. If Auburn will run the ball and just run it, not an RPO, not a maybe we'll do this and then check out of this. No, call it and run it. Greg McElroy says it all the time. Call it, run it. Call it, run it. Just live and die by it and see if it'll work. Then if you find out, okay, in the second quarter, it ain't happening, all right, I get you. But call it and run it with him more than 12 times this game. He needs it bare minimum 20 times. So if they can do that, I think Auburn has a chance to game control or clock management, and can try and beat them that way. But their biggest thing, obviously, hand the ball off, run it with Jarquez. He's going to get you yards and piece drives together. But when you get your opportunities to come away with points, you have got to come away with points. That's my biggest thing. I just don't know that Auburn's going to have that many chances against this Texas A&M defense to do that. I don't think they're going to dominate us on offense, but I think defensively they're going to have their way with us, or with Auburn, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, first off, it just kind of shows you the parity in the SEC. The first place team in the conference, or tied for first at 5-1 in the conference, goes on the road to Auburn, who is 1-5 in the standings, 13th in the SEC. And Texas A&M is only a 2.5 point favorite. I mean, that just kind of shows you where the gap is in the SEC. It is not very big. It really isn't. Um, I'm gonna go with my gut. I texted you on Saturday. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I think Auburn wins. I think Auburn wins this game. Honestly, I think I think to do that though, I think Jarquez Hunter needs a Rocket Sanders type of game that he had against
Yeah.
A&M a couple weeks ago. He had on the money 20 carries, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, there's a threat of Lenore Sellers there in the run game. He had over 100 on the ground as well. But I mean, this is a really good defensive front, but I do think Auburn can have some success on the ground. Um, I think I would expect a lower scoring type of game. I think, as you said, they've done a pretty good job at times against mobile quarterbacks. I think they can limit Texas A&M offensively. I'm expecting a an awesome environment. I mean, it was a great crowd the other day
Yeah.
for the UL Monroe game. I think being the last home game of the year, I think it's going to be a really good crowd. And I said it earlier this year. There were some games that Auburn lost that they shouldn't have, and I also thought they would beat some teams that maybe they shouldn't potentially, and they really haven't beaten anybody they shouldn't have this year. I think this is the game they do that.
I hope you're right.
I don't know. I think it's a really close game, but I'm gonna lean with my gut and I'm gonna go with Auburn. I just have a ton of respect for going on the road in the SEC. Like that is just so hard. I think that's a big reason the line is what it is. Um, I think A&M's a good team. I respect them a lot. I I don't know if they've been quite as good as like what they've been ranked. I think South Carolina, and albeit they're playing extremely well, but I think they expose some things. I think Auburn wins a really close game. Um, I mean, I respect totally what A&M's done all year. I could see them win this game. This is a total 50-50 type of game for me. But I'm gonna lean Auburn because I just think they're due to beat somebody that maybe they necessarily shouldn't. Because I mean they've had so many games like they're better than what their record is. They've had turnovers. There's a few teams out there that I think are better than their record, and I don't think their record doesn't tell the whole story. College football, you hear it a lot. Like you're not necessarily what your record says you are in college football. The schedules are different. There's a lot of discrepancy in strength of schedule from conference to conference. So I don't think that's the case. I think Florida's better than what their record is. I think Auburn's maybe not a ton better, but I think they're better than 4-6. I think Kansas is better than 4-6. They're getting healthy now. They beat BYU. I think there's a few teams out there that are better than their record says they are, and I think there's some teams on the other hand. I think like Missouri that's not really as good as what the record is.
Right.
I think there's quite a few teams in that boat as well. So I'm gonna lean Auburn. Like I said, just kind of a total gut play for me. Being at Jordan Hare, but I'm gonna roll Auburn ever so slightly in a close, low scoring game.
Yeah.
To
What about
throw
Bama?
another
Oh,
wrench.
what about Bama traveling to Norman?
I mean, I believe Alabama should win this game pretty handily. I mean, this year I'm just a little more cautious though because, as I said, going on the road it's really tough. I just when I look at the game though, I just don't think Oklahoma has the offense to stay in it.
I agree with you.
Um, but all signs would point the way Alabama's been playing. But when you're a fan of that team, you never want to get overconfident. Like you want to respect every opponent you go and play, especially going on the road in the SEC. Um, I think Alabama should win this game, and I think the way they played at LSU, they handled the crowd noise. Um, they've been much better, not getting as many procedural penalties. They've done a great job recently of taking care of the football. And what I think to me has been the most impressive thing since the Vandy and the Tennessee loss, they've had 5 games since that Tennessee game. They forced 16 turnovers in 5 games. I mean, they're one of the top teams in the country. They've forced at least 3 turnovers in their last 5 games. They forced 4 against South Carolina and 3 in the other 4 games. So they've been creating turnovers about as well as anybody in the country. They've pretty far exceeded now the turnovers they forced all of last season. So they've been much better in forcing turnovers. I haven't looked at the updated numbers, but they're one of the tops in the country in turnover margin. Um, so I think it was +7 when I looked at it. I know it's higher than that now. So um, if they can keep doing those things and limiting penalties, I like them to win pretty convincingly. I just don't think Oklahoma. Now they're going to put up a fight defensively. I mean they're very good. So if Alabama gets behind the chains, um, then I could see them struggling offensively for a while, and maybe it stays closer than what you'd expect. But I think if they stay ahead of the chains, I just don't think Oklahoma's going to be able to score enough to stay in it for 4 quarters.
And then Ole Miss and Florida. This game's a lot more interesting than I thought it was 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, Lagway, going to be there, going to be playing, going to be even more healthy than he was this past week at Florida. That definitely helps them out. I'll be honest. I think Ole Miss is probably the most talented, if not top two most talented team in the conference. I just don't think Florida's going to have the guys to hang with them. I think it's going to be a lot like the Texas game was for them. I just don't think they're going to be able to slugfest with them for 4 quarters. I think it might be a little close early, but I think Ole Miss defensively is going to give them a lot of problems. And then offensively, I think they got guys out the wazoo over Florida. But I think defensively is going to be Florida's or Ole Miss's biggest strength in this game. They have not allowed a 100-yard rusher all year, I don't believe. So if they're not going to be able to run the ball, Ole Miss has got the secondary to be able to play lockdown defense back there. I don't see a recipe for success for this Florida team against Ole Miss just because they don't have the same type of caliber guys that Ole Miss does and the same amount of those guys. They don't have the depth that Ole Miss does either.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly. I do think it's a lot more interesting than like if you just looked at it on paper. I do think it's a lot more interesting than if you just glanced at it. The way Florida's playing with DJ Lagway in there. Um, I agree with you. I think the way Ole Miss is playing, how elite they are up front, that travels wherever you play.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh
can
yeah.
take that anywhere. You can take that overseas. You can take it to the moon. You can take it to Gainesville, and it plays a dominant defensive line and get pressure on the quarterback. So, that's what they say. Defense travels is what I hear. So, um, but anyways, I agree with you. I think Ole Miss has got too much, but this is one of those games, and Florida's good enough the way they're playing, and especially the way they're fighting. If you don't execute like you're capable, they're definitely capable of beating you. Or if you're kind of not that Ole Miss is looking ahead, but if this is one you're not coming in locked into necessarily, they're good enough to beat you. But I just think Ole Miss has a little too much on both sides of the ball. I do think Florida keeps it pretty close, especially early. Um, but I think Ole Miss is just too good on both sides of the ball right now with the way they're playing here at the end of the season. I think they're too much for Florida, but I do think Florida keeps it pretty interesting for a lot of this game.
Well, I'll tell you this: if Lane Kiffin allows his team to look ahead on anybody else after the Kentucky game, then they deserve
Yeah,
to lose. It'll be
yeah,
100% on him. I don't see that happening again with this Ole Miss team. I
yeah.
don't see them getting caught looking ahead ever again, especially after that Kentucky game. So I don't think we'll have to worry about that. And I think Ole Miss takes care of business because they know they control their destiny. If they win out, they're going to be in the college football playoff. And then the last game that I think is really, really interesting is against two 6-4 teams. And I think that the one that is ranked should not be ranked, and the one that is not ranked should be ranked where the team that's ranked is. LSU is hosting Vanderbilt. LSU is number 22. Vanderbilt is not ranked. They're both 6-4. There's been a lot. Vanderbilt's kind of been figured out. I feel like the game plan is out on them, but that does not negate the fact that LSU still cannot stop a running quarterback. And what does Diego Pavia do better than a lot of people in the country? He can tote that mofo. So I like South Carolina, or excuse me, I like Vanderbilt to win this game. I definitely like them to cover the 7.5. I think that they're going to give LSU fits. Like I said this past week, I think LSU is an unmotivated team. I feel like they quit midway through the second half last week. I don't see them getting back up and getting in that mode where you got to fight to the last whistle. I don't think we're going to see that from this LSU team again this year. So give me Vanderbilt, give me them to cover, and if you really want to do it, take the money line plus 250. I think it's going to be a payday for you.
Yeah, to be honest, looking at it, I like the over in this game. It's 54.5 right now. I think both these teams are going to score on each other. I think LSU will score on Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I do. Um, it concerns me, I guess, a little. I mean, Vandy's such a ball control offense, but I do think they can. I think they'll be able to put up enough points. I think it's going to be not necessarily in the 40s or anything, but I think it can get up in the 50s and cover that 54.5. I do think both offenses are going to have some success against one another. Like you've said, LSU has struggled mightily against running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks. Jackson Dart, Marcel Reed, Lenore Sellers, Jalen Milrow, you name it, they've struggled against it. Um, so yeah, I think this is a really interesting game. I do like the +8 or +7.5 down there in Baton Rouge. Like I said, I do think Vanderbilt comes more motivated in this game. Um, but I'm really curious to see the fight that LSU comes out with. Like, can they kind of flip that page on these past three games and come out, in Death Valley prepared and ready to go and kind of help right the ship a little bit here in the late part of the season. Um, Missouri, Mississippi State, I don't have much to say on this game other than come on, drink, win one of these last two games, bro. That's all I need is you to win one of these last two games. Mississippi State in Starkville. I'll tell you what, man. If I was closer to Starkville, I may ride over there and support Coach Drink. I'm a little too far though, so I ain't gonna make it over there. But I need those Tigers to come through with one more victory. I want to go ahead and seal that deal. I'm nervous about them playing against Arkansas, so I need them to go ahead and take care of business here.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that Arkansas game, the way Missouri's playing, that one kind of scares me. I don't know. I don't know if that's in Fayetteville. No, it is in Cuomo, but I'm still scared about them playing Arkansas. So I need the drink to go ahead and get that eighth win under his belt there in Starkville. That's about all I got to say on that one.
Yeah, I think they get it done. I really hope that the Mississippi State listeners that are tuning into us each week, they don't feel neglected or negated. If there's really just not a whole lot there to talk about. We'd say the same thing week after week if we were to talk about it every single week. They're not quite there, man. That Levy's going to get them there. They're competitive. They definitely got fight. They don't have any quit in them, and they're moving the ball against some really good defenses. They just don't got the guys yet. When Levy gets his guys in there, it's going to take a little bit to rebuild this program. But I think Levy's the guy for the job. I think he's done a good job this year so far with what he's been dealt. I think the future is bright for Mississippi State, but it's going to take a little bit to get there. A lot of teams nowadays are, if their coach ain't doing it in the third year, it's pretty much, all right, next year's your last one and you're out of here. I think Levy's going to have a little longer leash. I think he's going to have 4 years before anybody says anything about his job. I think he's got a legit 4 year span where he's going to get, you get to do what you need to do. And if it doesn't work after 4 years, then we'll talk again. But I think he's got a lot longer leash than most coaches do. And I think that it'll get there eventually. He's gonna need to get a couple pieces of his guys in there. There's a lot of building that needs to go on in that roster. He's got his hands full with just putting that together. We're not trying to be, rude or hateful towards Mississippi State. There's not a whole lot to cover right now.
No, I love the fight they've shown this year, and I think in a lot of games they played, you know, um, kind of over their heads a little bit. The way they've fought with some of these teams in the SEC, I
Yeah.
think played a lot more competitively than people thought. Blake Shapen going down too was a really tough blow. I like a lot of what I've seen from Michael Van Buren, the true freshman quarterback for them. I think, obviously a tough situation to be thrown into as a true freshman and maybe not all quite the pieces you need around you. Um, but I think in this modern era too, I think with especially for offensive pieces. I think that's going to be a kind of an attractive destination in the
Yeah.
portal because it is in, a lot of players want to play SEC football. And I think he can really get some good skill players in there that want to
All he's got
play
to
in
do is
his
show him his
offense.
resume and say, "Look what I've done in the past with all my offenses." I mean,
Yeah.
that's enough to get a kid to come there for sure.
Yeah. I think, too, quarterbacks are going to want to run his offense with the success that he's had. Skill players are going to want to play in this offense. So, um, with coaches now, with him specifically being able to utilize the portal, I think that helps turn over things a lot more quickly than would be otherwise. So yeah, I think there's a chance for them to get some. Obviously they're not going to get the talent of some of the top of the SEC, but I do think they can get some, some pretty talented pieces because we've seen good quarterbacks there. Mississippi State's had some really good quarterback play over, the last 10 to 15 years. So I think that's going to be able to continue. But yeah, I love their fight, and I think it's just going to take some time to build it because they just don't have the necessary personnel right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did want to talk just briefly about a couple of the other games around the country. I did want to get your thoughts on Ohio State, Indiana, kind of where you saw that game. Uh, what about Colorado in prime position to win the Big 12 potentially? Got a huge game against Kansas this week. Obviously coming off that win against BYU, and they're a team I said earlier. I think they're better than what their record says they are. They've kind of had some tough injury luck and had some close losses, I believe, here and there. So I think that's going to be a really interesting game. But what do you think about that Ohio State Indiana, and what are some other games you're kind of looking at this week around the country?
The Ohio State Indiana game, love Signetti. Well, I think Ohio State's going to take him to the woodshed, if I'm being honest. The toughest game they've played all year is against Michigan. We know what Michigan is this year, not much of nothing. Michigan took them down to the wire. They jumped out early, but Michigan took them down to the wire and made it a ball game there in the end. Ohio State, they're head and shoulders better than them at every position on the roster. Now, I think Cincinnati's going to have some schemes that's going to help them compete, but I just think Ohio State's going to wear them down and last longer than them. They're the better team through and through, which doesn't mean you're always going to win, but I'm taking Ohio State, and I would take Ohio State to cover. They're not getting overlooked. This isn't just some Indiana team that's going to sleepwalk in there and end up, or an Ohio State team that's going to sleepwalk in there and get upset. They're going to be locked and loaded, and they're going to be ready to go. And I don't see Indiana staying on the field with them for long at all. Not hating, just seeing it, calling how I see it. The Miami Wake Forest game, Miami struggled with some teams they shouldn't struggle with. I don't think Wake Forest should be on the field with them. I don't think Virginia Tech should be on the field with them. That was going to be interesting to see. I think Miami's going to win. I mean, huge favorite. I think Miami's going to win, but be careful because they're known to play down the competition this year. That's for sure. And then Penn State, Minnesota. I think that's a upset alert for Penn State. I mean, they've been playing extremely well. They're sitting there in the playoff after playing absolutely nobody. And the only team they played, they got thumped. So blows my mind. But I think Minnesota, they got the identity to come in there and upset this team. I think Penn State is a lot like I'm talking about Ohio State and Indiana. I think they're head and shoulders better than them at every position on the roster. That doesn't mean you're always going to win. Minnesota's at home. They're hosting them. 2:30 kick. I think it's going to be rowdy. So on CBS, I mean, it's going to be a primetime game. I think Minnesota has a chance. I think Penn State will win, but that's a game that really jumps off the page at me. And then
Yeah, I agree.
Colorado, like you talked about, Colorado sitting in the driver's seat, potentially could win the Big 12. And if they win the Big 12, they're going to be in the college football playoff more than likely. But this is a team, like you talked about earlier in the podcast, Kansas, they're getting healthy. They're finally getting back everybody, all their pieces. They looked really good last week against BYU, pretty much dominated that whole game. Wasn't a huge high-scoring game, but they were in control from snap one to the finish. This is not a game you need to overlook if you're Colorado. This Kansas team can beat you. I think Colorado's better than them. I think they've been playing extremely well offensively the last few weeks. But I think this Kansas team is one that I would be a little worried about if I was a Colorado fan.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas, they've won back-to-back ranked games. They beat Iowa State. They went on the road and beat BYU. you look at some of their losses though, and the reason I say like I think they're better than what the record says they are. They lost by 6 at Indiana. They lost by 3 to UNLV, 4 at West Virginia. They lost by 11 to TCU, by 4 to Arizona State, and by 2 to Kansas State. So I mean, they have like five single digit losses in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like they've been competitive in every game they played in. So I do think they're a team that um they had a really good season last year. And you want to talk about tough jobs. This is a tough job. Kansas football. So no, I
They were
think
giving out free tickets a couple years ago in the middle of the game.
yeah, so I like I think they're better than what people think, and I think they're going to give Colorado a really good game this weekend. Um, I love what you said about Minnesota hosting Penn State. One of my favorite lines of the weekend, Minnesota plus 11 and a half. I definitely think they cover
It's at
that.
12 and a half now, according to ESPN
Yeah,
bets.
yeah, 12 and a half. I mean, yeah, if it's in that range, I love that. Um, I always have a thing for home underdogs.
Yep.
When you're
Especially
giving
late in
double,
the year.
yeah, I just think I think that's a game that's going to go down to the fourth quarter. Um, I don't know. I think Minnesota's got a fairly decent shot at it. I mean, Penn State's the better team, but I just think the way Penn State plays football too, they're not really going to pull away from a ton of
Right.
teams with the way they play. So I just think it's a little bit more, lower margin for error. So I like Minnesota to at least keep that close and cover there. And a game that's kind of flying under the radar there in the Big 12 is shout out Kenny Dillingham's got the
Yep.
Arizona State Sun Devils at 8-2. They're hosting BYU this weekend. That's going to be obviously a huge game there in the Big 12. He's done a fantastic job out there. They've had a great season. They've only lost 2 games on the road. So they're undefeated at home. Um, they just went on the road and beat Kansas State this past weekend. So yeah, I think that's going to be a big game. Um, and I think that's another one to keep your eye on. That's got conference championship implications on the line, and obviously playoff implications. Um, if one of those two teams were to win the Big 12, so going to be a really interesting weekend in the SEC around college football. Got upset potential all over the place.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So just be sure to keep it locked in here with us at Saturdays in the SEC. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate that. And feel free to comment on any of our videos, anything um, you have to say about what we've talked about, any general thoughts or something you want to hear us talk more about. We'd love to hear your feedback. And hope you guys enjoy week 13, and we'll catch you back here next week.
Yeah, thank you guys. Can't believe that we're already here at the end of the year. I mean, my God, it feels like we just started the previews a few weeks ago. We appreciate you guys tuning in to us all season long. Our last few weeks, and then we're going into rivalry weekend next week. I mean, it's the best part of college football season right here. We're getting into the nitty gritty, the end of the year, and then into the postseason. So we hope you guys keep continuing to listen to us, and we appreciate you guys, and thank you.